This is the National Broadcasting Company.
Hey everyone, I'm Simone. Tonight on Signal, Roger Stone was back in court today. We speak to the man who's responsible for some of his most recognizable looks over the years, his tailor. And the yellow vests are rocking French politics, but what are they all about? We go inside the political uprising. And at the Academy Awards this weekend, Spike Lee gets his first shot at Best Director for Black Klansman, and Black Panther is up for Best Picture. We're looking at the Oscars' complicated history with black film. But first, we are following the latest twist in the ongoing saga of Empire actor Jussie Smollett. Smollett was released on $100,000 bail after a court hearing. He surrendered for arrest early this morning for allegedly filing a false police report claiming he was the victim of a hate-motivated attack in Chicago last month. Smollett has been charged with felony disorderly conduct, and this afternoon, the head of the Chicago Police Department accused Smollett of sending himself a letter containing racist language because he was unhappy with his salary on Empire. And when that didn't work, paying $3,500 to orchestrate the attack on himself. Now, he could face probation or up to 3 years in prison if convicted. The police superintendent spoke about the arrest earlier today.
This announcement today recognizes that Empire actor Jussie Smollett took advantage of the pain and anger of racism to promote his career. My concern is that hate crimes will now publicly be met with a level of skepticism that previously didn't happen. I love the city of Chicago and the Chicago Police Department, warts and all. But this publicity stunt was a scar that Chicago didn't earn and certainly didn't deserve.
All right, here are some statistics recently published by the FBI. There was a 17% jump in hate crimes from 2016 to 2017. And in a separate study, the Human Rights Campaign reported that last year they conducted a survey of black LGBT youth, and almost 70% of them said they had been verbally insulted because of their identity. And 30% said they had been physically threatened. So if these issues aren't out of the ordinary, what is it about the Smollett case that captured the country's attention? NBC's legal analyst Danny Savalos is going to talk us through how we got here and the legal issues now at play.
The Jussie Smollett case in Chicago has a lot of twists and turns, but as with most criminal cases, if you boil it down to a factual timeline, a lot of details emerge. January 22nd, a letter arrives at Cinespace Studios, where Empire is filmed, containing homophobic threats and a white powdery substance. Later on, it's determined that this is a crushed-up painkiller. January 29th, the attack. Smollett says he's outside of a subway speaking on the phone to his manager when he's attacked by a group of men wearing ski masks shouting, "This is MAGA country." They throw what he calls some chemical on him, and they beat him up as well. So he goes to the hospital. The police then begin their investigation. In the next couple days, Chicago PD releases surveillance photos of persons of interest. But the following day, Smollett apparently refuses to turn over his cell phone, which could potentially give officers clues about whether or not he was, in fact, on the phone with his manager when he was attacked. February 1, Smollett gives his first public statement in Essence magazine, saying, "I have been working with authorities, and I have been 100% factual and consistent on every level." February 11, Smollett provides limited and redacted information about his phone calls. He later says he didn't want to turn over his phone because of private pictures and contact information. February 13, a break in the case. Two men are taken into custody. These are Nigerian brothers Abel and Ola Osundairo on suspicion of carrying out the attack. By February 15, however, police released these persons of interest based on, quote, new evidence. February 16, we learned the probe has shifted into an investigation of whether Smollett staged the incident and paid the two men to attack him. By February 20, Smollett becomes a suspect, and detectives present evidence to a Cook County grand jury. He's eventually charged with felony disorderly conduct, which is presenting or giving information leading to a false police report in Illinois. Smollett then releases a statement saying he enjoys the presumption of innocence. February 21, Smollett turns himself in. He is now in custody of the Chicago Police Department. We're going to learn a lot more about this case in the coming weeks and months as police continue their investigation. This case raises the issue of false police reports. These are a real problem because they waste law enforcement resources and create terror in the community about a threat that isn't real.
All right, thanks so much, Danny. Well, every weekend for the past 3 months, the streets of France have been filled with protesters wearing reflective yellow vests. It was sparked by opposition to a gasoline tax, but it's become a social movement that's drawn attention to inequality in the nation of freedom, equality, and fraternity. But what do they really want? Matt Bradley from NBC's London Bureau went inside the yellow vest movement to find out what they're all about.
There's been a lot of that in Paris lately, basically every weekend for 3 months. For the most part, the weeks are calm, business as usual. Then, on Saturdays, you've got tear gas, burning cars, stun grenades, and a sea of yellow vests. So by law, every French driver is required to have one of those in their car. But now they've become chic. Symbols of defiance, a kind of politics prêt-à-porter, uniting behind a single complaint that nearly everyone can agree on.
En France, it is trop cher. On n'y arrive pas. I work and my husband work. À la fin, nothing.
When you dig into it, though, it's not all that unified. The movement has no centralized leadership and no central ideology. There are no representatives and no real way of negotiating demands. So does this just keep going? If they can all agree France is too expensive, is that something they can actually change?
Is this movement a left movement or a right movement?
In fact, it's full of people coming from the right, extreme right, center, left, and extreme left.
So what unites them?
I think they want to change the system. It's a kind of revolution, a new French revolution.
It all started last summer when French President Emmanuel Macron announced higher taxes on diesel fuel. He said it was to help the environment by reducing emissions. But the price hike infuriated many who rely on cars, mostly those who live outside France's beautiful cities, where not having a car can be seen as a sort of status symbol for an educated, wealthy elite. No one knows who donned the first vest, but roadblocks and protests spread throughout the country. In December, after less than a month, Macron's government backed down from the fuel tax and promised more tax cuts and a boost to the minimum wage. Game over, right? Well, the protests persisted, and the list of demands got longer. To understand why the Yellow Vests and their supporters are so hard to satisfy, you need to understand how the Yellow Vests see themselves.
Alors, c'est contradictoire, oui et non. C'est contradictoire dans le sens où, effectivement, contre un système politique, mais en ayant aussi une démarche non assumée politique.
Maybe it isn't a contradiction. Maybe it's just the latest sign of our changing political times. Because here's the thing, despite the violence and the contradictions, the Yellow Vests are relatively popular.
It's been a very strange movement and a very strange relationship with the public opinion. Now we have 54% who are still supporting the movement, which is quite high.
The Yellow Vests were dominated by the right wing at first, but they've since attracted support from the far left.
And what we are now seeing is that there's also populism on the left rising up, and it shows that we may have about 40% of the voters now who are really attracted by very strong populist movements.
So they're not political, but they make political demands. They're far left, and they're also far right. It makes you wonder, do these easy categories even mean anything anymore? French politics, like most of the Western world, has long been divided into a clear right and left. For many voters, those established ideologies are starting to seem stale. No one knows where it's all going, but one possibility is a political spectrum that more closely resembles a circle, with the two political extremes joining against a center that, for many, represents an out-of-touch establishment elite. Variations on this pattern have popped up across Europe and the Americas, populist movements pushing voters away from established parties and causes. President Macron is still trying to respond. Last fall, he unveiled a series of grands débats, big debates. They're kind of like local town halls, and the idea is to bring the Yellow Vests in from the cold. At one session outside Paris, there were quite a few gray hairs, but not a single yellow vest.
So, this is democracy in action.
Yeah.
You think so?
We try to.
Yeah.
It's a test, but it's also a challenge. Because when you look at the people around the tables, they are, most of them over middle age.
Yeah.
Which means that you've got people who are already committed.
They're talking about how to distribute tax revenue to local projects. Important work, no doubt. But it was easy to see why this might not excite the yellow vests. It's also clear why yellow vests might not feel welcome among this crowd.
Les gilets jaunes, c'est une sorte de prurite un peu d'urticaire, si vous voulez, de l'eczéma. C'est de l'eczéma. C'est de l'eczéma à un moment qui apparaît, et puis qui ensuite qui disparaît.
Jerome Rodriguez suffers from a condition far worse than eczema.
J'ai perdu la vue. Ouais. J'ai perdu la vue parce que je me suis pris un tir de LBD 40. Ouais. Et le LBD 40 est une arme de guerre aujourd'hui.
D'accord. Une arme de guerre.
C'est une arme de guerre. Dans le code, c'est une arme de guerre parce que c'est un lance-grenade.
Like most yellow vests, Rodriguez blames the violence on the police and government. So far, 3,000 have been injured and 3,000 more arrested. But Rodriguez still sees this moment as part of a very French legacy.
Il y aura une guerre dans la rue. Hein?
Mais c'est pas une guerre. C'est pas une guerre, c'est une révolte. C'est une prise de voix. On veut parler, on veut exprimer quelque chose. Et il a été élu pour nous écouter, pas pour mettre ce qu'il veut, parce qu'en plus, tout ce qu'il met en place, il ne l'a jamais mis dans son programme.
France celebrates its revolutions. There are monuments to them throughout Paris. But like the protesters, they've been standing in the cold for a long time. So can the yellow vests march their way into the halls of power? Or will they just become another part of the scenery?
And here are some of today's headlines briefly. Brace yourselves. There will be another election in North Carolina's 9th congressional district. That's an order coming from the state's Board of Elections due to allegations of illegal activity in the handling of mail-in ballots. The race has been unresolved since November's midterms, and today's decision came after several days of hearings into Republican ballot collecting practices. And the Republican candidate himself, Mark Harris, said for the first time today that he agrees there should be a new election because the public had lost confidence in the results. State investigators found there was a, quote, coordinated, unlawful mail-in ballot scheme to elect Harris over Democrat Dan McCready. Harris said he'd been repeatedly assured that nothing illegal was happening to benefit his campaign, but his own son said otherwise, testifying that he had warned his dad about the illegal tactics of a political operative working for the campaign. All right, Michael Jackson's estate filed a $100 million lawsuit against HBO today over the upcoming documentary Leaving Neverland, in which two men accuse the superstar of sexually molesting them when they were kids. The lawsuit alleges that by co-producing and airing the documentary, HBO is breaking a contract the company signed back in 1992 when it ran a concert special and in return agreed not to disparage the singer. Jackson, who died in 2009, maintained he was innocent when faced with charges before and was acquitted of child molestation charges in 2005. Now, HBO defending the documentary, saying it still plans to air it in early March. And Lindsey Vonn retired as the greatest female ski racer of all time. After skiing the final race of her career a little over a week ago in Sweden, Vonn said her decision to leave ski racing behind was because her body was broken beyond repair. Vonn sat down on NBC's Today for her first interview since retiring and said she's having a hard time adjusting to the lack of routine, but did drop a hint about what might be next.
You know, I hope that I've done something in my career that's more meaningful than 82 wins, and I hope that the mountains remember me. I definitely know that the fences will. But it's been an amazing ride, and I couldn't be more thankful. You know, I truly have loved ski racing my entire life, and I've been lucky enough to do it for so long. And unfortunately, you know, my body gave out, but my passion for skiing will always remain. And I can't wait to go skiing with my kids one day.
I love it. You've earned it, Lindsey Vonn. And those are your headlines briefly. We'll be right back in 30 seconds.
We are going to start with something different tonight. This is one of those things that you have not been otherwise hearing about in the news, but stick with me.
Feed your mind with fresh perspective. Get your favorite MSNBC shows now as podcasts.
The topics we cover on MSNBC every day, they're driven by big ideas, big themes, huge societal changes. And that's what we talk about on our new podcast. It's called Why Is This Happening?
Why Is This Happening with Chris Hayes. New episodes every Tuesday.
A federal judge banned Roger Stone from speaking publicly about his case today. Earlier this week, he posted a picture of that same judge with apparent crosshairs next to her head, along with an equally menacing caption. Stone later said the image wasn't meant to be threatening and deleted it. Today, he said he was, quote, hurtfully sorry for his own stupidity and that he has a team of volunteers that helps run his social media, and one of them had done the post. Now, the judge said she didn't find his explanation credible and had doubts about whether he'd learned his lesson here. Now, just a refresher, Stone faces 7 charges that came from Robert Mueller's investigation into possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russia, all of which he denies. But politics aside for a moment, Stone's sense of style could also be interpreted as provocative. I mean, the guy is a student of fashion. So I spoke to the tailor who guided him in his early years, menswear guru Alan Flesser. Today, Roger Stone appeared in court in front of a judge that he appeared to threaten with an Instagram post. What would you advise Roger Stone to wear to court in an instance like that?
Blue suit, white shirt, blue tie, white handkerchief. Something very simple.
Roger Stone has called you his sartorial mentor. Is that how you would classify your relationship?
Yes, I would say that's accurate. I think that my sensibility of dress appealed to him. It was a little bit more aggressive within a kind of traditional format.
When you say aggressive, does that mean bold in the prints and patterns and the expression?
Yeah, of course, in Washington, it's a problem. I mean, in politics, it's a problem because clothing is not supposed to be a subject of conversation in the world of trying to relate to people who are less well off than you and things of that sort. So,
right. Do you think Roger Stone was able to get away with a more bold fashion sense because he was this operative orchestrating behind the scenes?
It's a very good question. I think that because he, is an operative and is a person who needs to be recognized and he needs to develop his own brand, so to speak. Part of Roger's brand, of course, was his presentation.
Sartorially speaking, does he make you proud or does he let you down?
Sartorially?
Yeah.
When he does it right, when he looks good, I think that I'm happy that, I was helpful in terms of getting him to that point. When I see him in some sort of a derby hat and black glasses or a black leather jacket, there's a very fine line between good taste and then kind of caricature.
How did you discover that he had a Nixon tattoo?
Oh, he was very proud to show it to me.
He just showed it to you in a
Well, he was just getting dressed or whatever, or changing clothes and want to see my tattoo. I said, what? Okay. If I was unsure about our differences politically, the choice of Nixon for someone like myself, I didn't even know anybody who had a tattoo, no less, like Nixon. It was like, okay, you are strange.
Did you ever talk politics when you were dressing him and taking his measurements and all that stuff?
The minute we would get even close to discussing like something that was political, it was clear that his point of view is going to be diametrically opposite to mine.
Has the election of Donald Trump changed the tenor of your relationship with him?
I mean, he has been working for Donald Trump for as long as I've known him, so no surprises there. But the fact that he's so outspoken, in his support of Trump would make it almost impossible. I said to my wife this morning that, as really terrible as Roger can be, he's been very supportive of me and my career. So, I mean, if he's broken the law, he deserves to go to jail. But there'll be certainly a part of me that's sad to see him end up like that, because that's clearly in his own hands and of his own doing.
He wouldn't like those jumpsuits if that were the case.
It's the monotony of it that he's not going to like. It's the wearing of the same thing every day to be exactly like everyone else. That might be the cruelest punishment he'll ever receive.
That man has so many more stories. I wish we had time for all of them. Okay, here's some scary news. Around the world, cases of measles, that's right, measles, are on the rise. More than 900 have died in Madagascar, and widespread outbreaks have been reported in the Philippines, parts of Europe, and even here in the U.S. The culprit? According to scientists, it's low vaccination rates. So, in developed countries like the U.S., how is this even possible? NBC News medical writer Dr. Shamard Charles broke it down for us.
The measles outbreak is getting worse, with nearly 130 cases already confirmed this year. It sounds like a small number, but it's got health officials pretty worried. That's because almost half of these cases are centered around one area, the Pacific Northwest. The anti-vaccine movement has gained steam there, and this outbreak is mostly affecting unvaccinated children. But that isn't the only place where anti-vax groups are a thing. There are hotspots across the U.S. where parents are opting their children out of vaccines. What's changing is some of those unvaccinated kids are now going against their parents' wishes, and we're actually starting to see a number of teens getting legal advice on Reddit to find out how they can get caught up on shots without parental consent. Hi Macy, how's it going? What was it like being a child who was unvaccinated?
So when I about reached the age of 12, I started to realize that everybody received vaccinations and shots in order to get into middle school. And I was really confused because I had never been to a doctor in years.
Did you tell your parents about this?
They just told me really just to try and not talk about it because that would obviously bring about criticism.
At what age did this sort of turn to, hey, I might actually want to get vaccinated myself?
I was about 16 years old. My biology teacher was explaining to me how exactly vaccines work. It kind of contradicted everything that had been told about, mercury and vaccines causing cancer and autism. And now that I'm enrolling in a health sciences major, I have to have all the required vaccinations, which is completely understandable because you are working with patients. And hopefully I will have all my vaccinations done before my major starts in the fall.
Would it be safe to say that this is a pretty straightforward process?
It is pretty straightforward where I am. Really, for anybody that's kind of in my similar position, the hard part is going to be facing the criticism probably from your family if they ever do find out.
Macy's lucky because she's in a state where minors can get vaccinated without their parents knowing. Those laws vary a lot depending where you live, though. But why are we even talking about vaccines and outbreaks to begin with? I mean, the CDC said measles was eliminated from the U.S. in 2000. So why are we seeing cases nearly 20 years later? And how much does the anti-vax movement play a role?
The same time measles was eliminated also heralded the start of the anti-vaccine movement. So we've seen now declines in vaccine coverage among 18 states that allow non-medical exemptions for reasons of personal or philosophical beliefs.
There are currently about 100 or so confirmed cases of measles. Why should we really be concerned about a relatively small outbreak?
The vaccine exemptions are happening in the hotspot areas where you have 10, 20, 30% of kids not getting vaccinated, and that's where the danger is. If you're a parent now living in Clark County, Washington, you have to be very worried about bringing your infant into public spaces. And it's not just measles, it's also whooping cough, places where parents are not immunizing their kids against flu. Measles is the most contagious of them all, so it's a biomarker of declines in vaccine coverage.
What Dr. Hotez is talking about isn't just happening here. Parts of Europe and the Philippines are also dealing with vaccine skepticism and measles outbreaks of their own. The good news is we're now seeing immunization rates soar in places like Washington as more and more people try to protect themselves from the current measles outbreak. And if 95% of their population gets vaccinated, they can restore herd immunity and contain this disease that was supposed to disappear from the US a long time ago.
All right, Spike Lee, of course, one of the most respected filmmakers in the world. His career has spanned more than 3 decades, but this weekend will actually be his first ever nomination for Best Director. We spoke to Shola Lynch, filmmaker and curator at the Schoenberg Center in Harlem, about the Academy's long and complicated history with black film.
You know, the Academy is a group of people who are part of the Hollywood system, all the members, particularly in the 1990s. I mean, this is all pre-Oscars So White. And the sensibility of the membership drives the voting. It's not reflective of the larger society. The Academy members are people with particular tastes and interests, and they vote their tastes and interests. So a film like Driving Miss Daisy or a film like The Green Book today allows for broader entry. One question would be to ask why Spike Lee hasn't won Best Director before as one of our preeminent directors. He's an independent filmmaker, really. And Hollywood and the Oscars are tied together, and Black folks have always been tangential to that. And sometimes when we make art and create artifacts, it's not appreciated in the moment. It's appreciated by future generations. Hollywood movies represent a certain swath of American history and culture. Due to the history of race and gender, women are not the main characters in these stories, and Black women fit in that same category. To be a Black actress in Hollywood, it's a complicated road because you're constantly being asked to test your integrity. Am I gonna play this maid? Am I gonna play this mammy? Am I gonna play this sidekick? You know, am I okay always being the supporting character? And over time, that's shifted some. There are roles that break through, although they aren't necessarily awarded. And I think of Angela Bassett when she played Tina Turner. I mean, I remember watching that movie and just being like, ah! You know, there's certain moments where a character and a role comes together and it's just big. Octavia Spencer was in The Help, and she used that notoriety to leverage other filmmakers. She's a big part of why Ryan Coogler was able to make Fruitvale Station. For the argument that certain actresses were born in the wrong time, like Dorothy Dandridge or Lena Horne, is an ahistorical view. Because without them, we wouldn't have Lupita Nyong'o today. We wouldn't have Viola Davis, Halle Berry. I mean, to me, Black Panther is spectacular because of the breadth of characters related to Black history and culture and Black actors. There's no one bad guy. There's no one good guy. You know, we're all of it. And the women are spectacular. On the one hand, I love the Oscars, and I watch, and I love the dresses and the pomp and the circumstance. But that's not what being an artist is about. As a storyteller, you're a griot. So what you say about yourself and your culture is important. Period. And when you have those moments where all of that comes together and you can win an award like Moonlight, right? Then it's spectacular. And so, you know, we're in the Schomburg Center, and the American Negro Theater is the home where so many actors got their start. Ruby Dee, Ossie Davis, Canada Lee, that generation of actors, they were in the afterglow of the Harlem Renaissance. Harry Belafonte, we think of him as a singer and an actor, but he produced many of the movies in the 70s with Sidney Poitier. We are whole people, and it relates to the history. And the history, in the Constitution, in the foundation of our culture, we are designated as 3/5 a human being. 5/5. That's what we are. That's the story we want to tell.
I'll be watching this weekend. That's our show for tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.